we work with brands in the industry to kind of alleviate that gap and solve that problem for them as to, how do I directly reach customers within the industry without that kind of traditional marketing aspect of, billboards and direct to consumer commercials, things like that. So our brand side of the platform acts as kind of a supplement to what our retail partners do on a daily basis and allows brands to more so collaborate with our retail partners to kind of allow them that avenue to provide some of that digital content marketing direct to consumer to these customers.
Welcome to Business Ninjas, brought to you by WriteForMe, where you'll hear from business leaders who are out there growing their business and slaying it every day. Learn from the masters. Let's get started.
Hey everybody, welcome back for another episode of Business Ninjas. I'm here today with Jacob Lefkowitz. He's the National Director of Brands at Springbig. Jacob, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me, Kelsey. It's a pleasure to be here.
Yeah, excited to have you. So Jacob, why don't you start and tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, so as you mentioned, my name is Jacob Lefkowitz. I'm our National Director of Brands at Springbig. We are the leading supplier of advanced loyalty programs and service both brands and retailers in the cannabis industry. I'm based here in Boca Raton, Florida. And it's a bit about myself. I actually didn't necessarily come from a cannabis background, came from a sports marketing background, actually. Prior to Springbig, worked for an agency that planned and executed consumer events for a lot of global brands, BMW, MasterCard, American Express. But ultimately, the purpose was kind of creating an experience for both existing and potentially new customers on behalf of the brand. So fortunately, I've been able to apply a lot of what I learned then into kind of what I do today at Springbig, where I now oversee our brands division, which we specifically help cannabis brands enhance their customer experience through content marketing, also through a number of our digital channels, and then help them analyze purchase behavior, things like that, to enhance that overall customer journey based on those findings.
Wow, so it sounds like you've had a really interesting journey kind of getting you to Springbig. Before we dive a little bit more into that, tell me a little bit more generally about Springbig.
Yeah, so we've been in the industry for, a little over probably 10 years now. Our founder and CEO, Jeff Harris, comes from a very impressive background of customer loyalty, where he founded a company called IntoQ, who powered loyalty programs for a lot of big box retail. So, Adidas, Reebok, Citibank. And then obviously following that, he started Springbig kind of as a small private company, providing loyalty through almost punch card solutions to pizza shops, laundromats, things like that. And I'd say about 6-7 years ago, saw the potential in cannabis and has never looked back, and obviously kind of amassed into what we are today.
That's so interesting. So tell me a little bit more about, the platform and how it really works.
Yeah, so there's really two core functionalities of our platform. We have a retail focus side and a wholesale focus side. So our retail focus side of the platform particularly provides that loyalty marketing aspect to dispensaries that obviously operate on a daily basis to provide loyalty programs to their customers coming through their doors. And then the second piece of it is our wholesale side of the platform, where we work with brands in the industry to kind of alleviate that gap and solve that problem for them as to, how do I directly reach customers within the industry without that kind of traditional marketing aspect of billboards and direct to consumer commercials, things like that. So our brand side of the platform acts as kind of a supplement to what our retail partners do on a daily basis and allows brands to more so collaborate with our retail partners to kind of allow them that avenue to provide some of that digital content marketing direct to consumer to these customers that are part of those loyalty programs and obviously shop in the dispensaries that sell their products.
Mm-hmm. And, as you were just talking about that, it kind of got me thinking that the cannabis industry can be, pretty heavily regulated. Talk to me a little bit about how Springbig works to navigate that to, still build up the success of its clients.
Yeah, I think for us, again, what we do is loyalty. So it's creating that connection between brands, retail fronts, and customers. And I think at the end of the day, in cannabis, it's a challenge, like you said, based on regulations and just the fact that at the end of the day, a lot of the customers that we work with, they don't necessarily know who your quote unquote customer is today, because I think ultimately that's still evolving. And I'll use it just an example to kind of put it into layman's terms for, let's say, someone who's not in the industry. But you take Missouri, for example, who 7 months ago, you could only buy cannabis at a medical dispensary with a medical cannabis license in Missouri. Whereas today in Missouri, you or I could walk into a dispensary recreationally for the first time and buy whatever we wanted. So, if you have a cannabis brand in Missouri today, in just the last 7 months, you've seen, millions of people walk through the door of a dispensary selling your product that there's absolutely no data or no historical data on. So for us, we really solve two of those problems. It's we're going to allow you to market your brand, your products directly to consumers that shop in a dispensary that are selling your products. And then also we're going to help determine kind of who your customers are. What are they buying? How often do they shop? How much do they spend? And so on and so forth.
Mm-hmm. And you're talking about the loyalty program, the loyalty functions on the platform. How is Springbig able to differentiate itself? I know you mentioned a few kind of different features. Talk to me a little bit more and expand on that.
So, I think actually, we recently went through a rebranding within the last year and removed our cannabis plant from our logo, which was obviously a big step for us. And reason being is we no longer are focusing only on cannabis. We've launched divisions now focusing on alcohol, other avenues of CPG, and part of that is, to your point, with some of the different laws and regulations ever so changing in order to kind of more diversify our business, as we obviously enhance our platform and its features, but also to just kind of prepare ourselves for what's to come as we get closer to things like, let's say, federal legalization, which will obviously drastically change kind of the current landscape.
You mentioned at the beginning kind of talking about using content marketing, digital marketing to help these brands. Talk to me about how people can leverage Springbig to really tap into some of those little more niche markets.
I tend to use a lot of examples when I talk about the cannabis industry. I think it highlights the challenges that we face, because I think a lot of people look at cannabis and compare it to traditional CPG or traditional retail, and don't realize the challenges and with regulations and things like that and how different it really is. I'll use Publix as an example because I'm Floridian and we love our Publix. But Publix sells hundreds, if not thousands, of SKUs of, let's say, potato chips. There's Lay's, Ruffles, Doritos, Pringles. As a consumer, I don't know these brands just because I shop at Publix and I see them on the shelf. I know them because I see them on billboards, social media ads. I see them on Super Bowl commercials, magazines, celebrity endorsements. They're everywhere ultimately. Whereas in cannabis, it's the complete opposite. So although we're starting to see some evolution of it, for example, Twitter just started allowing cannabis ads to an extent. But for the most part, there are no marketing channels for cannabis brands to reach consumers directly. So, our priority has kind of become, okay, how do we alleviate this for brands, retailers in the industry? And, that kind of has evolved into what we have today, which is ultimately the different channels, one of which, and kind of our core channel being that collaboration between retail and brand partners in order to allow brands to send that marketing content to loyalty customers at dispensaries carrying their products. But to answer your question, as far as our primary channels, obviously that includes mainly, MMS, SMS, text messaging. Email is another one. And I'd say digital ad displays within stores, a big one. But for us, it's not necessarily the different channels or a number of channels, because again, you're so confined in cannabis to those two or three channels. It's not like you have a laundry list of options. So for us, I think it's more of enhancing the ways that you're able to utilize those channels. So Springbig as a whole, We have certain products, for us on our menu, it's called an auto connect, which for lack of a better word is kind of an auto triggered message that will fire out based on an action. So, if Kelsey is a loyalty customer at a dispensary, on certain triggers, whether it be on your birthday, you're going to get a message that fires out. On the day that on your 10th visit, you're going to get a particular message that fires out, and so on and so forth. So kind of different, enhancing that customer experience to better fit our customers through each of those channels.
I think that's fantastic. And I imagine too, with your, coming from the sports marketing, you have to get, creative in the ways that you're leveraging it now, because like you said, you only have a few channels and a few different options. So, I think
Sure.
great example that you gave of Publix, Jacob. But, talking about common misconceptions, I think that there probably, I can imagine, are a lot of common misconceptions, not necessarily around just the cannabis industry alone, but also to kind of the industry, the loyalty that Springbig dances in. Talk to me a little bit about any common misconceptions that you tend to hear often.
Great question. I think the one you hear and see the most is cannabis is this big, booming and sexy industry that I'm going to be able to break into, make a ton of money and super quickly, which could not be further from the truth. And I think anyone in the cannabis industry can attest to that. And we're still so, and no pun intended, we're still so green in this industry. Again, to use another example, you look at a brand as big and as successful as a Coca-Cola, who has mastered the art of marketing, has been around for I don't know 10 15 decades, and then you compare it to the cannabis industry and you look at the majority of our industry. Even if you take the top brands and the top retailers that are in it, they haven't even been around for 1 decade. So the point being, there's still so much evolution, I think, in this industry that is yet to come. The people that are in it are currently the ones who are paving the way. So the amount of challenges and amount of hard work is unfathomable at times. But I think that's why you see so much turnover, for example, in our industry right now. It's with a lot of people breaking into it with that mindset of, hey, this is going to be super easy. It's a booming industry. I'm going to make that quick buck, and obviously, quickly figure out the reality of it. So I think that's a misconception you hear and see a ton, within our industry for sure.
I think that's a really interesting one. And, going back to kind of your background, there's not necessarily that historical data that you can lean on in the cannabis industry to say, this is what it was like before, let's try this. Like, you really are, building the plane as you're flying it.
Exactly. Yeah. It's something new every day. Keeps you on your toes for sure.
Well, awesome. Well, Jacob, as we start to wrap up this conversation, is there anything that you want to leave our listeners with, whether it be advice, anything else about, Springbig, anything you want to leave our listeners with?
I think advice in general, just in my role, I think one of the best pieces of advice I've ever received, really just as, a manager of people is, you aren't, and I'll try not to butcher it, but you aren't doing your job if you're asking someone to do something that you couldn't do yourself. But when your team can carry out a task better than you've done your job. And I think that's something that's kind of resonated with me throughout my career. As you develop, as you grow, start to have the ability to delegate. Last scenario you want to be in is passing something off, not being able to answer a question about that task. So for me, I think what I've kind of taken from that over the years, if I'm going to oversee, let's say, a division, whether it be, customer success teams, sales teams, marketing teams, analytics, I'm going to list out every single one of those tasks amongst that team. And over time, I'm going to make sure I can carry out those tasks accordingly. And obviously, any role that has direct reports, that's your job to kind of help those people grow, not only within their role, but in their careers and their life. And, I think, like I said, eventually your team's going to rewrite that script and kind of provide an even better solution to what you taught them. And at that point, I think you can say you've done your job.
I think that's terrific. Great advice, Jacob. Well, like I said, this has been a terrific conversation. If people wanted to learn more about Springbig, where can they go?
So you can find Springbig, springbig.com. Pretty simple. It's SPRINGBIG.com. And then on social media, it's Springbig Rewards. And you can always connect with me personally on LinkedIn, Jacob Lefkowitz. But no, otherwise, yeah, that's the best way to find us.
Fantastic, Jacob. Well, again, thank you for this very insightful conversation. I appreciate all of your insights, that leaving us with that bit of advice. I think this was great. And I really appreciate you being on Business Ninjas today.
Likewise. Thanks so much for having me, Kelsey.
Yeah, great to have you.